everyone, thank you so much for joining my launch party. Oh my god, it was such a blast. Y'all were hyping the chat. I reread the full chat stream like 3 times because I wanted to make sure that I responded to everyone's questions, and I was just so excited to see everyone's feedback. So I would love to hear more feedback of what you felt about our launch party, what your favorite moment is, and how you would like to participate in future online events later on, because we got some other things planned for this year, and I'd love to get your feedback so that we can incorporate those things into our planning process. I wanted to touch on some of the questions that people had in the chat. So the first question is from Elaine, and she asks, gender-based violence is very common in Africa. Are you doing any work with the government to address this issue? It is such an ingrained part of their culture. There needs to be some changes that come from the top. Thank you for your question, Elaine. So gender-based violence is not just common in Africa. It is common everywhere, especially everywhere. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So the question of, are we doing any work with the government to address this issue? We partner with the Ministry of Education, and we also partner with the nonprofit, non-governmental organizations, Bureau, in both of the countries that we serve, to ensure that all of our work is legally operating within the countries. And we also work with the Ministry of Education so that any academic programs that happens within schools is also authorized by the government. We do not do any direct work with the government because a lot of those institutions that partner with the government are the larger ones, such as the UN-based organizations. We are a very locally run grassroots organization that our community runs on their own. And so in order for them to have the freedom and autonomy to do what they think is best within the community, that government affiliation is not always helpful. I do believe that changes do need to come from the top. And as we are working to uplift survivors in leadership, and we're working with other organizational partners, especially legal partners, to ensure that justice is happening within the court systems, that's a huge part of ensuring that things can move also from the bottom up and not just from top down, because corruption is also very prevalent, as is sexual violence, and the two go hand in hand. Jovanie had a question. How did you practice mental and emotional health as you were on the journey of writing Liberation is Here? And how did you keep up with your heart work at Freely in Hope? So when I was writing Liberation is Here, I actually had to take the time off because for me, the creative process needs its own creative process. It's hard for me to do creative work, admin work, firefighting work all at the same time, and I was working on a very strict deadline. So in order to ensure that I met my deadlines, I took bits of time off throughout a course of 3 years to write the book. There was a writing phase, there was an editing phase, there was a re-editing phase, and so at all of those breaks, my staff took control of the wheel and they killed it. I said, I'll still be online, call me if there's an emergency, but every time they really ensured that they were taking care of things. And how I practiced mental and emotional health as I was writing the book is ensuring that I was surrounded by good people. Also, because I was not in Kenya and Zambia with my staff during that time, I went to South Africa, where a lot of my good friends live, and I also went to Maui where my aunt and uncle live, and surrounding myself with those people that really encouraged me and affirmed me was really crucial to uplift me and support me in the writing process. Marie's question was, are you able to talk to your parents regarding your mental health, or is it a struggle? That's a really good one. I know that when I first came back, I was not yet diagnosed with PTSD until a couple weeks later when I started the therapy process for the first time. And that was rough. Going to therapy on my own, feeling a lot of shame around having to go to therapy, and also the diagnosis of PTSD was difficult for me to actually articulate until many years later. So while I was in the process, no, I did not communicate or articulate any of that to my parents. I actually moved back with them because where I was living at the time was not a very conducive environment. So I moved from LA and came back to the Bay to live with them. But a lot of my time was spent working and in silence or on the road. And so they didn't see a lot of it because I hid it from them because of the shame and the stigma surrounding it. But as time moved on and I began to speak about it more publicly, it's now become a more public conversation in our house, where we can be like, hey, I'm not feeling well today. Hey, I need a break. Hey, like, can you just turn the TV down? I need some peace and quiet right now. And that's totally accepted in our family system. Jovanie had another question. What did your grandfather think about the book? Oh my God. So he actually wrote an article about it. He's a writer as well. So I will post that article for you, Jovanie, so that you can see his reaction. But yeah, the book came out on his 91st birthday. And I mean, he's been telling me, like, write your book. And I'm like, okay. And then years later, it's like, what do you want for your birthday? And he gong, and he's like, I want you to write your book, you know? So that was many years of him telling me that he wants me to write the book. Tina Coe coming in with some really great questions. A fellow Asian asking, were your parents understanding of your career choice and your ongoing work? They were not initially. They had invested a lot of money in my academics where I studied film production. I was doing pretty well as a wedding photographer. I had actually been working since I was 12 years old in the film biz. It was kind of at the cusp of digital filmmaking and photography, so it was all the rage. And here I am, 12 years old, running around with a camera, and couples would trust me to shoot their weddings. I don't know how that happened, but I started my career at 12. And so because I was doing that from 12 to 21, I was doing all right. And for me to switch to international development work, having already spent so much tuition money in filmmaking, was a big surprise. And my mom, in all of her motherly concern, just wanted to ensure that I would be okay financially and that I could figure it out financially, even if it wasn't in the career path that I initially chose. So it was tough at first, but after a couple of years of seeing that this thing is actually bigger than myself and bigger than them and bigger than what we've all ever dreamed of, now they're my biggest supporters. So I'm a huge, just super grateful for them and in the ways that they support me in so many ways. And your other question, what is something that is hard to share with sponsors? I know you lightly touched on it in your book, and I wanted to hear more about your thoughts around sponsorship. So yeah, the hard thing about communicating with sponsors, and what I've noticed, is mostly the old school philanthropists, mostly in the white world. There's that one-to-one model of $25 a month will save a child. That is not true. $25 a month does not do anything. It barely buys food. So what I've had to do is I talk to our donors, and we call them donors, not sponsors, because sponsors also have a negative connotation in our experience, where we've had sponsors, like actual academic sponsors, use that against some of our survivors. We've had some sponsors also violate and exploit some of our survivors. And so that term is really triggering for our community, and so we use donors. And so our sponsorship model is not one-to-one. And that's why we established the Hope Circle, which literally encircles holistically our scholars with everything that they need to thrive. So for example, $30 a month funds their therapy, $50 a month funds their safe housing, $100 a month funds high school education, $250 a month funds university education. So everything that they need, the legal support, the healthcare support, our support system surrounds them with all those things. So it's multiple people pouring in, investing in one person. And I think that model is so crucial, because also in our culture, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And the village is not one person. And so to also eliminate and to not encourage saviorism, that's why that collective and that communal and that village mentality is really important for us to be like, hey, y'all, all of our girls have an entire collective, an entire village that invests $30 a month to $1,000 a month to support you and your dream. And that holistic surrounding is just so beautiful for us and for them to expand this global support system that we have. So something that I've had to do with donors is to re-educate them on what sponsorship could look like, on what their donation can do. I've also had to turn down a lot of donors who want to dictate how their money is spent. And while I understand, especially in the grant making world, why that's necessary for accountability purposes, in actuality, our community knows what's best. And so in giving them the authority and the autonomy to spend your donated funds through what they think is best for their community is something that we really uphold as a value system in our organization. So for donors or for grant makers that say, you know, we want to fund this thing and we don't really do that thing, then it's not really a good fit for both of us. And so that's why we work with individuals giving whatever they can to really support this collective village. Megan's question is, what was your biggest inspiration when you were writing? One of my biggest inspirations, well, two, I guess, would be water and mountains. So I love hiking. I love looking at water. I did try to surf a little bit, but it's not my thing, so I'd rather just look at it. But hiking really inspires me. There's some spiritual overtaking that happens for me when I'm hiking. I get a lot of epiphanies while I'm hiking. I think there's just something about that grueling work of ascension that is really, a metaphorical in the work of doing anything difficult and achieving the top, looking down and being like, oh my God, look how far I've made it, but look at this view because of my hard work. And so that like interplay of the peace and calm of water together with the hustle and the, I guess, what do you say, like the victoriousness of hiking a mountain is something that really inspired me. And also my girls, like, oh my God, I can't tell you enough how the support from my girls and the scholars have encouraged me daily, especially when things were getting really rough and I was really struggling with writing a few parts of it. They would just remind me that these stories are important because I have a platform that needs to be shared with them, and for them to get their stories out also meant that my story got out too. So they were my inspirations completely, 100%, in terms of how I kept them in mind throughout the writing process, remembering that, okay, if they can tell their stories publicly with no shame, with so much courage, with so much power and authority, then I could try. So they're my models really for writing Freely in Hope, writing this book, and living my life another day. So thanks all for your beautiful questions. If you have any more, feel free to put them down in the comments and I will get back to them when I can. Until then, I will see you at the book club on October 24th. I can't wait. Please tell your friends about it. We're going to have really intentional, deep dialogue with my staff. I know at the launch party it was cut really short, but this time you'll have a lot more time to really dig into conversation with my staff. And we'll also provide tools and resources so that you can run your own book club in your context and to support survivors where you are. So I hope that you'll join us then.